Welcome in to the Rockies Insider. I am your Rockies Insider, Patrick Lyons, with a lot to go over today, this Wednesday afternoon, December 18th, as it's now been a week since the winter meetings have wrapped, and it's taken a while for some things to really get absorbed that were said, that were mentioned by GM Bill Schmidt, manager Bud Black. Over the weekend, there was an event I was at featuring Hall of Famer Goose Gossage. Had no idea he was going to be there. He spoke for over an hour, believe it or not, for what was scheduled to be like maybe a 15-minute question and answer session. He went off. He had some things to say about the Rockies. And there's been a lot of transactions, of course, around Major League Baseball. The Oakland A's doing some interesting things, acquiring players, trying to get better ahead of the opening of their new ballpark in Las Vegas. And when you think about Las Vegas and you're thinking about the Rockies, you think about Kris Bryant. Kris Bryant was the topic of conversation last week in Dallas during the 2024 winter meetings. And we've got a bit of an update. I was the one who was able to ask the question to GM Bill Schmidt, because going into the offseason, there was a lot of conversation about the Rockies sending some of their training staff to Las Vegas to make sure that all the rehab, his regimen, everything, his preparation for the 2025 season was going to be on point. And according to Bill Schmidt and according to Bud Black, Kris Bryant is, quote unquote, having a good winter, or maybe it was a great winter. I shouldn't make sure I get the quote correct, but good winter, great winter. It is a winter. We'll wait and see what happens in 2025 when he does report to spring training. But we do know that his back issues have been lingering, and it's a chronic pain that is not going to go away. It's going to be with him for his entire life. It is a soreness, and it is also something that has plagued many other players throughout the history of baseball that unfortunately have had to play through. Or some, like a Sandy Koufax, decided that he did not want to play through those injuries, despite the great success he was continuing to have in his career. And despite the amount of money he was making in his career, Sandy Koufax decided he was going to retire young, because you can't really put a price on your health. So Bryant in Las Vegas, going through, doing his workouts, spending about 3 hours each and every day, doing his stretching, making sure that his body is in the best possible shape. And he did speak with Patrick Saunders of the Denver Post this past week. And Brian didn't sugarcoat it. It sounds sugarcoating a little bit, but he didn't. He said, quote, "Players are going to tell the press every offseason, this is the best shape I've ever been in. I'm not going to give you any of that. I've always been hard on myself, but this offseason, I'm at peace with what I'm seeing, and I'm super encouraged. It's put me in a good headspace." Now, that's probably not the best quote you would like to hear from a player you've invested $182 million in, or a player in which the club has viewed time and time again to be an aircraft carrier for this team. I don't think Colorado is really viewing Kris Bryant as being this player who did win an MVP, who did win a National League Rookie of the Year award. Right now, they don't really know what they've got. But what they do know is, for a player that's making $27, $28 million still for 4 more years, they need to be getting more out of him than an average of 50 games per season. They definitely need a lot more than that. So KB is not saying he's in the best shape of his life. He's never going to make that quote. Is he maybe in better shape than he's been the last couple years going into spring training? I could see that being the case. And could 2/3 of Bryant's best still contribute and still make an impact on the Rockies in 2025? Absolutely. A less than normal Kris Bryant on the field is still going to be a lot more valuable than some of the options coming up from the minor leagues. Now, granted, there are a lot of young players right now in the Rockies system that are top 100 guys. They're top 10 in the farm system. And so when you're talking about guys at AAA, you're talking about 3 of the Rockies' best prospects right now in Zach Veen, Jordan Beck, and Yanquiel Fernandez. So slightly different situation. But if you just want to say a bat, a player that you're going to put at DH, Kris Bryant, 2/3 of him is still right now, better than a lot of these prospects. And if they are trying to avoid losing 100 games, then keeping Kris Bryant healthy, having him on the field, being 2/3 of Kris Bryant, that's going to be better at your odds in regards to losing only 99 games. I think after 2023, after the Rockies finally lost 100 games, something that owner Dick Monfort was very proud of, was very quick to remind people, a lot of fans too, a couple people that are pseudo-journalists love to point out, hey, the Rockies have never lost 100 games. 99 losses, 100 losses, there really isn't much of a difference. There really isn't. So despite the fact that, sure, the last 3 years with Kris Bryant on this roster have been the worst 3-year stretch in team history, whether or not you've been losing 100 games or not is really irrelevant. So trying very hard to lose only 99 has no value. We saw what the Astros and we saw what the Cubs did in the early 2010s. They prioritized the future of the organization over the present of the organization, over the present season and seasons. So do these young guys deserve to get more playing time than Kris Bryant? Not exactly. Those young guys do need to earn it. But at a certain point, 130 games of Kris Bryant hitting maybe 15 home runs, 20 would be an outstanding year, I think, at this point. Those are the expectations that I have for Kris Bryant. I think a lot of people around the game would say 20 home runs would be a success at this point for KB. But 20 home runs over 130 games, how much value does that have for the future of this organization? Is Kris Bryant going to be on the roster of the next Rockies contender on the next Rockies postseason club? Right now, it's a 50-50 crapshoot. It's probably 50-50 at this point. Yes, he does have 4 more seasons left on his contract, but A, are the Rockies going to try to get out from underneath that sooner than later? If so, then you got to think Bryant's not going to be around for that. Or if they do keep Kris Bryant around and he is not able to contribute at a high level and he continues to be hurt, even if he has given you 15, 20 home runs each and every year for the next 4 years, you take that. But that's not enough. One player, your DH, hitting 20 home runs is not enough to get you into the postseason. It's not enough to make a difference. You need other players. You need superstars. You need all-stars, not established names. You don't need that. You can build from within. The Rockies have done that in the past. That's typically where they found the most success. It's only where they found success. Other than the 1995 team, which again was just 2 years removed from being an expansion franchise. 2007, 2009, and then the 17-18 teams, those were both homegrown squads with homegrown all-stars. So whether Kris Bryant is on the roster or not, you still need to develop those all-stars. That is the only way this team gets back to the postseason. So ultimately, Kris Bryant, this factor that you invested $182 million in, is not going to be that factor. Can he contribute to this club? Absolutely. Can he be somewhat of a veteran presence? Can he show what it means to grind, especially with certain back issues that he has? Yes, he can be a tutor. He can be a mentor to these young players. So he still has value. Is he going to be $28 million valuable over the next 4 years? I don't really think that there's any way that that can happen. And I don't really think that there's any way that the Rockies can get out from underneath this contract without it really hurting the organization. You either have to pay down his contract, which you're going to have to do, and or trade away some of your prospect capital. And right now, despite the fact that the Athletics are acquiring players and are preparing for that new stadium in Las Vegas in 2028. Actually, isn't it 2027? Because it's only supposed to be 2 years in Sacramento. So if it is 2027, it is. 2027 is when they're supposed to move into their new ballpark in Las Vegas. They're already acquiring players now that should be around for Las Vegas. in 2027, Kris Bryant could be one of those guys. He is from Las Vegas. But I don't know that the A's want to do that deal right now because Bryant's value on the field is still so unknown. It's still so unknown. He's been working out at his father's house in Vegas. I know if state of the art is the word to use to describe the batting cage that's there, but he is working out. Does have a pitching machine there. So he's kind of getting back to a lot of the basics. He started 10 days after the season ended for his Get Well project. And like I said, for 3 hours a day, he's stretching, lifting weights, working on building a stronger core in the front to alleviate the pain in the lower back. He's got a personal trainer in Vegas, according to Patrick Saunders of the Denver Post, and he's got a physical therapy program designed for him by Steadman Hawkins Clinic in Denver. Manager Bud Black said last week in Dallas, we need Kris Bryant to be Kris Bryant. And there were statements that were made. More statements by Bud Black. He said he still is, in our opinion, very capable of that. He'll be the first guy to tell you he's very capable. The plan is for KB to be the club's DH after the retirement of Charlie Blackmon. He might play a little right field. He might not play first base. Michael Toglia is already there. But I think those comments about Kris Bryant needing to be Kris Bryant and Kris Bryant could play a little outfield were messages for Kris Bryant more than they were to the media or to fans. I think KB really needs to show up to spring training in the best possible shape that he can. Not just for himself, not just for the organization, not just for the fans, but for the future of this franchise, for the young players to see how it gets done when you have to grind away. And in the case of his lower back, yeah, we're talking about grinding. We're talking about discs. We're talking about a situation that is not comfortable. And look, that's just the state of professional sports. You're getting paid to do a job. You're giving up your body. You're sacrificing your body. If you don't want to do that, you can give back the money. But if you do want to take that money, you have a job to do. You have certain responsibilities. And so I don't think realistically Bryant should be playing right field. I don't think the Rockies want him to play right field because of potential injury risk in that. But do they want Kris Bryant to prepare as if he's going to play right field? Absolutely. Absolutely. Kris Bryant is not going to be Kris Bryant again. I would be really surprised if that happens. If he can get to 20 home runs in a single season, I think that would be a big success at this point. Again, 2025 could totally change the outlook over the remainder of this contract. There's really just no way that this ends up being a decent deal or a less than decent deal. But if Brian can stay healthy, 130 games, that's basically what he's played over his first 3 seasons. That's what we're talking about. 159 games in 3 years. So if he can be healthy for 130 games, that's virtually 5 months of the season. And he can be 2/3 of Kris Bryant. That's 280, 20 home runs, 75 RBI. Now you can look to the final 3 years of this deal and say, okay, now that you got a guy that can maybe hit 15 home runs regularly, which is a really low bar, and can stay healthy for a majority of the season as your DH, now we can start to work around that. Who do the Rockies have right now that has hit 15 home runs with 70 plus RBI on their roster? It's Tovar and Doyle. That's really it. Michael Toglia. And a lot of other guys you say could if they get the playing time. Ryan McMahon's right there as well. And that's really valuable. Hearing me say it out loud. Hey, that's 4 guys that you could say, hey, 15 homers, 70 RBI. That's pretty solid. Problem is there's a lot of guys around baseball that can put up 1570. Rockies need guys that can do 3100, and they don't really have anybody close to doing that right now. Again, you can squint and suggest that perhaps this guy or that guy could do it, but they don't have a guy that can hit 30 homers and drive in 100 RBI. CJ Cron was the last one that was even remotely close. And even still, with a 30 homer, 100 RBI guy on the roster, you saw how the Rockies fared. Wild the Innocent saying Nolan Jones, if he has a comeback, absolutely. I think Nolan Jones is in that conversation for 1570. It's not a very high bar. Jones, 2080, sure. Could he take a major leap and be a 3100 guy? Yeah, he could. Nolan Jones absolutely could. Brenton Doyle? Yeah. Maybe not 100 RBI, especially if he's hitting leadoff, which is one of the other pieces of news that came out of Dallas. That's going to be really hard to do. We saw Charlie Blackmon have 100 RBI out of the leadoff spot, but that was in a much stronger lineup, much deeper lineup. So the Rockies, they need more depth. They need, more than anything, they need a superstar. And they need Kris Bryant to be back and to be at least 2/3 of himself. So I don't honestly think right field or first base is going to be in the cards for Bryant. But I think that message has been sent by the team, by the organization. Hey, KB, you need to come ready to spring training. It's a 7+ month season, right? Spring training is a month plus. You got to be ready for that. We need more out of you. Rockies pre-arbitration allocation came out at the end of last week. I want to say it was Friday. New thing with the most recent CBA, $50 million pool that Major League Baseball has created for players who are pre-arbitration. So basically they're within their first 3 years, and it's based upon their wins above replacement in 2024, their B-WAR, for the baseball reference version of wins above replacement, because these young players are some of the best in the game. In fact, if you made a roster up of pre-arbitration players and you lined it up against the remaining rest of baseball, that's a team you can say it's just as good. You know, the NBA continues to make tweaks to their All-Star game. I honestly didn't even look to see what all the changes were because it's just too convoluted. MLB All-Star game is just perfect. But if you were to do something and say, hey, we're going to do the pre-arb players, the guys in their first 3 years versus everyone that has 3 or more years, that would be an entertaining game. And that young group of players, the pre-arb guys, can be just as talented, just as exciting as the guys with 3+ years. Absolutely. So Major League Baseball said, we gotta put some more money in these young guys' pockets. So $50 million is going to get allocated based on MVP, Rookie of the Year award voting, and their wins above replacement. Ezekiel Tovar gets a nice little bonus check of $485,000+. Brenton Doyle, $484,000+. And Ryan Feltner with a really great season. He was a bit of a topic of conversation in Dallas at the winter meetings. $241,000. Which is a over 25% pay increase. Because if you're making the league minimum at $740,000, which Doyle and Feltner were doing in 2024, that's a big increase. That is a major, major increase. Still a lot to talk about. I still have a lot to talk about. And I'm not sure where I want to go next. How about this? 2024 World Series, we had a couple pieces of souvenirs that have gone out and been put on sale. We saw the Shohei Ohtani 50-50 ball from September in Miami go for over $4 million. I believe it was like 4.3, which was 100 times the value of the Aaron Judge, oops, I dropped the ball from Game 5 of the World Series. That went for $43,000. But the grand slam, the walk-off grand slam from Freddie Freeman at Dodger Stadium in Game 1, Unbelievable. That wasn't even 2 months ago, people. That wasn't even 2 months ago. That's crazy. That's crazy to think about. But less than 2 months ago, that grand slam, walk-off salami to end game one of the World Series for the Dodgers just sold for $1.56 million. And because maybe it's been a rapid fire, right? All in succession, the Ohtani ball, the Judge ball, the Freeman ball. Man, baseball's pretty damn great. There's no other professional sport like it where you've got a souvenir. You go to the game and you can get a game-used souvenir. It's the only game where it's guaranteed. Sure, hockey players will go ahead and throw a stick or a puck over the glass. I know the protective netting that they have at games now in the NHL. I don't even think you can get a puck anymore. Football, sure, a wide receiver is going to give you his gloves. There's memorabilia if you hang around after the game, perhaps, but it's not guaranteed. It's not in-game souvenirs. It's just something that I've almost taken for granted, that you go to a game, there's going to be a souvenir that you can get that was used in the game, that you could be sitting in your seat, minding your own business, and a baseball falls in your lap, and it is now worth tens of thousands. In the case of the Freddie Freeman Grand Slam, $1.56 million. That makes baseball incredible. If you were inventing a sport right now from scratch, which people do all the time. I mean, people do it with board games, but if you were to invent some kind of game or sport where the fans can get a souvenir from the game, I don't even know that you could make up baseball from that perspective. You reverse engineered it. How can you put something that's game used from the stadium, from the ballpark, from the arena, and put it in the hands of a fan for free? You don't even have to buy it. It's just going to end up there. You can't even invent something like that. That's why baseball's great. Rockies Insider with Patrick Lyons here to talk about a living legend, a Colorado great, Hall of Famer, Goose Gossage. Really cool event. Before I get to some of the MLB news and transactions, really cool event from over the weekend. Bill and Ed's Holiday Extravaganza. If you know, you know. A very special group of Denver folks, some in the media, some big league scouts, independent league coaches, managers were there. Shout out to my buddy Mark Knutson there, former Rocky, the first ever Colorado native to play for the Rockies, 1993. Look it up. A lot of luminaries there. And one of the people there was Goose Gossage. I did not know he was going to be there. Word had gotten out, I guess to a couple people. Again, private event, about 100 people that were there and hanging out, saw him. He got announced. Oh, that was really cool. The family of Roy Halladay was also there. So the Colorado Hall of Famers, well represented. Very, very lucky, very blessed to be invited to this each and every year. And Goose, for what seemed like it was going to be about 15 minutes, question and answer session, ended up being an hour and 15 minutes. We were supposed to do trivia. We were supposed to do all. I was ready to go. I was all ready to win this bad boy. And it never came to fruition. That's okay, because we got to see a Hall of Famer share his thoughts on his playing career, on getting signed, and so many other things. I did win a raffle, which was really cool. An all-time name. This sounds like a name from a guy from the 20s and 30s, but he was born in 1930. Great name, Vinegar Bend Mizell. Incredible. This was signed in 1992. I have no idea how Bill or Ed got this in their collection. I do know that the Phillies and the Blue Jays, I think the Rockies will also donate some things to this really cool event. But Vinegar Bend Mizell was on the 1962 New York Mets, the expansion New York Mets. So that was a cool thing that I won again at this free event for some awesome baseball folks in Denver. But Goose Gossage, he got going. He got off on a tear. Talked for a good 15 minutes just about what it was like signing with the Chicago White Sox, not having an agent, thinking about what was next for him coming out of Colorado Springs. And Owen Perkins, shout out to him. Check out his YouTube channel. I'm going to put up some video as well from Goose Gossage, but he's got the entire hour 15 of Goose, again, talking about the start of his career. And he had a couple choice words for the Colorado Rockies. First off, I was not aware. I didn't even realize that Gossage's career did go into the start of the Rockies. 93 and 94. Goose was still around. A's, Mariners. Was still really good at the age of 42. Was worth about a half a WAR. They could have had a Colorado native on the Rockies. In fact, could have had him to open up Coors Field in 95 after that Mariners deal ran out. Never came to fruition. Goose did work for the Rockies for a little while. And one of the suggestions that he had was a real interesting one. And I know the guys over at Blake Street Banner did talk about this on Tuesday night. But Goose said, because the outfield is so damn big, grow the grass long. Grow the grass long, because even if you were to have 3 center fielders in the outfield, you know how many times a ball gets hit in the gap and it just goes all the way to the wall. It goes all the way to the track. You got to wait for it to stop, and then you can throw it in. A double turns into a triple very easily. We've even seen singles turn into doubles very easily. And sure, because the outfield is so big, there's going to be those base hits that dink and dunk in over second base, over the first baseman's head, that become singles that are base hits there and nowhere else. But a lot of those singles that become doubles will vanish. A lot of those doubles that become triples, I think, will also vanish. Not all of them. I don't know that is a perfect solution to grow the grass a little bit longer. But I think it could. I think it could have an impact. Is that something that the Rockies have talked about behind closed doors? Probably. They probably have. Would that make a major difference? I really don't know. I really don't know. And the fact that they haven't doesn't mean, they're not trying. No, again, there's a cause and effect. There's risk reward in all of those things. And so I don't exactly know that would be of a major benefit. Now, that being said, if you would have suggested, hey, put up a wall that goes from right center field all the way to the auxiliary scoreboard in front of the bullpen, and then a real small one down the left field line, that's actually going to keep the ball into the ballpark and actually reduce run scoring by a fraction of a run per game, I would have said, I don't know that that's true. Not necessarily. Sometimes clearing the bases allows a necessary reset rather than that guy still standing out there on second base. So would that make a major difference? I'm not sure. But there are a lot of other things that Goose Gossage did say about the Rockies. Again, you might want to check that out over on Owen Perkins' channel, Owen Perk. I did not get all of it because it was getting a little spicy, and I decided to not film each and every second that he was up there, because ultimately this was a private event, and we did check with Goose afterwards. He was fine. He said, yeah, I'm not hiding from anyone. In fact, he does shout out Dick Mumford point blank into the camera. Hey, I'm talking to you, Dick. Did also have some comments about the golden at bat rule. He does not care for that. Look, that's not happening. We know that is not happening. But he did have some comments about that. He not a fan of the golden at bat. He is a fan of the pitch clock, because he understands, look, these players take a while to get going. Let's keep this game moving. He said they ultimately couldn't wait for the games to get over so they can go out and have a good time. Have a night out on the town. Players players now have they're a little bit more, I don't want to say faithful to their wives and families, to suggest that maybe they weren't in the past. Look, we've heard stories, but nevertheless, guys, aren't necessarily going out to party after the game. So if the game's a little bit longer, whatever, not a big deal. Players are there to play baseball. A lot more in this generation, to say the least. But didn't like the golden at bat, does like the pitch clock, does not like analytics, does not like the baseball nerds, as he called them. I know Manny Randall was almost worried about meeting Goose because, Goose doesn't like analytics or people that are proponents of it or understand it even. And I guess Goose behaved, but still it was, I know Manny was a little bit worried there about, oh gosh, is just because, I deal with Baseball Savant and all these kind of things, is he going to hold this against me? So I know they had a conversation after the event. I haven't followed up to see how well behaved Goose was. But I did think it was an interesting point that Goose made about analytics and being analytically minded. Now, on one hand, analytics have always been around. What do you think batting average is? It's an analytic. It is. There's a period of time when you would just look at a ball player and say, man, this guy's great. He's the best in the game. And then Henry Chadwick and a lot of other baseball nerds at the time invented baseball statistics. And they said, well, what if we said, every time you get up to plate, that's a plate appearance. There was a period of time when guys didn't even walk because the object for the pitcher was to throw a strike. I mean, the goal was to throw it inside, to let the guy hit, not to allow him to miss. It was, look, the point is to hit the ball and put it in play. So just throw it over the plate. There was a time in which Candy Cummings, he invented the curveball, and people thought he was cheating because that was deceiving the batter. That's how the game of baseball has evolved. But in those early days, instead of just saying, this guy's the best, they looked and said, well, how many times has he stepped to the plate and how many times did he actually get a hit? Okay, there we go, batting average. And then eventually, well, wait a minute, this guy, he might not always get a hit, but he's really hard to get out. Because if you don't throw him a strike, he's going to take a walk. And that's on-base percentage. And then you got a guy who's only hitting singles versus a guy who's hitting a lot of doubles. Isn't the guy who hits doubles, isn't that more valuable? He's on second base after he swings the bat, where the other guy's only on first base. Hey, that's slugging percentage. That's all analytics. Now, if you want to suggest that these kind of analytics have gone too far, I mean, I guess you could make the case, but the rules are the rules. So all of the analytics going into the Astros and Cubs and tanking and inventing that and saying, hey, if we're really bad, we might as well. Like, the difference between losing 90 games and 100 games is not a lot in the standings. It's not really going to impact how many fans come to the ballpark, but that draft pick and that money that we get with those draft picks, that can make a big difference going forward. So instead of saying, hey, we might be good this year, we'll be better next year, and then we'll be bad, and then we'll be good again, we can throw all that out the window and say, let's just choose to be bad for 3-4 years in a row. And then when we've got the timelines of all these really great players lined up, then we'll be really good for 4 or 5 years. The rules in baseball allowed for that to happen. So yeah, did the analytical people hurt the game in that way? Perhaps. What evidence is there that the game was hurt by that? What evidence is there? What evidence was there? Did less people go to games in Houston and Chicago than would have if they didn't do that? Okay. Did that many more people end up going out to the ballpark when they were good? A lot more so, yeah. So how much did they actually harm the game? Sure, the sanctity and the honesty of, hey, trying to go out there and win. But that has not always been that has not always been true about baseball. Look, Goose also said, hey, all those guys cheated that did steroids, keep them out of the Hall of Fame. Did they cheat? Did they cheat? Steroids was illegal. They were illegal in according to law. But baseball didn't say they were illegal. There was nothing in the rules in the CBA that said you couldn't do steroids. And the commissioner who presided over baseball at that time, guess where he is right now? He's in Cooperstown. But all the other guys who were accused of using performance-enhancing drugs, some who did, some who didn't, some who were strongly linked, but there's not really that evidence, they're being punished. When there were players in the 50s and 60s, even before that, were using amphetamines, using greenies, that's a performance enhancer. Taking speed to stay sharp because you're hungover. That's been baseball. Baseball has been a flawed game. Let's not forget, Babe Ruth did not play a single regular season game against a black man. That's baseball. So if you want to go ahead and say analytics ruin the game and there's tanking and the sanctity of the sport has never been strong. So we can talk about it, we can ignore it and just say, hey, look, we all understand what's going on here. But to draw a line in the sand, look, draw it back there, move it back a little bit more, move it up to this direction, move it left, move it right. Don't put that line there. Gambling is the one. Gambling is the one. And we'll see what happens going forward with all of the gambling that is in baseball right now. I think that's the one that you really can't move, that line, because at least that has always been on the books. And that is what you have to rely upon. You have to feel that both sides are going out there to try to win the game. You might not have to believe that each team on the field was assembled to try to win every game, because we know going into spring training, the Rockies, for one, you know that this team was not assembled to win the NL West or to even go to the postseason. And so is that in bad faith? Where do we draw that line? So make sure you check out some of that interesting footage, to say the least. Let's talk some Major League Baseball. Let's talk some transactions. Let's talk about some teams that are making moves, that are trying to get better despite an unfortunate circumstance. Like, look at the Yankees. Juan Soto decides to go to their crosstown rivals, the New York Mets, and yet the Yankees don't say, well, we've only got one way to win, and that's with a generational talent. That's the only way. No, they say, well, we're going to find a different way. We're going to find a different route. We're going with plan B. They signed Max Fried, 8 years, $218 million deal, the largest ever given out to a left-handed starting pitcher. They acquired Devin Williams from the Brewers. He only has 1 year of team control. We'll see if they're able to lock him up going forward. And then on Tuesday, they get Cody Bellinger for Cody Poteet. First ever Cody for Cody trade. I mean, yeah, it's got to be. But the Cubs shed some payroll. He's got 2 years, $52.5 million remaining on the deal he signed last offseason. He does have an opt-out after this year. So the Yankees basically just take a contract off the hands of the Cubs. And now they've got themselves a center fielder, first base. And they need both those positions. Now they've got flexibility where, hey, look, we can go out and get another outfielder, or we can go out and get another first baseman. Cody Bellinger's got us. Should be noted, not that Cody Bellinger's wife dated Giancarlo Stanton. That's not worth noting, even though I just did. It is worth noting Cody Bellinger's dad, Clay Bellinger, did play in New York during that dynasty, during that heyday of the late 90s with the Yankees. So he's been a perfect fit for New York ever since Soto left and they had to pivot, ever since they had to go and do something else. So that's a good move for the Yankees. Are they done? I don't think so. Not at all. Right now, their second base, third base combination is Jazz Chisholm and Osvaldo Cabrera, Oswald Peraza, and DJ LeMahieu. Other options for them. I think they're going to try to upgrade at third base. I don't know if they're going to bring in Alex Bregman, but you upgrade at third base and you let Jazz play second base. Their left field first base combination right now is Jason Dominguez and Ben Rice, who was a nice little surprise at the end of last season. Dominguez is still only 21 years old, so maybe he's a sweetener in a trade to bring in somebody else, because the Yankees, although it seems like Anthony Santander and Teoscar Hernandez could be good fits for them, that's going to cost the Yankees a draft pick. If you're able to go out and make a trade for a really good player like a Cody Bellinger, you don't have to give up a draft pick for a player that rejected a qualifying offer. Yankees have been linked / interested in Paul Goldschmidt. I'm sure they would probably prefer Christian Walker right now over Goldie, but Goldie's got that qualifying offer attached to him. B in the chat, so confused why Cubs went all in, but then went cheap. The Cubs, I think the Cubs are a mess. I really do. They right now are a team that when you look at their roster, you look at the names, you look at the backs of their playing cards, and you go, all right, this is a good team. This is a good team. And they got a great manager in Craig Counsell. So that really does bode well for them, especially in a division like the NL Central. If you are in any other division, you're probably the Arizona Diamondbacks. That's on par with how good the Cubs are. And I think the Diamondbacks have a much bigger upside right now than the Cubs. But you acquire Kyle Tucker, and then you trade Cody Bellinger in one fell swoop. So did you really get better? Bellinger at least was going to be around for 2 years. Tucker's got 1 more year until he reaches free agency. And yeah, you can put a qualifying offer on Kyle Tucker so you can get that compensation pick back if he does decide to leave. But the Cubs, they're spending a lot of money. They're going mid-tier on a lot of their free agents. And look at the Baltimore Orioles, because I want to talk about them next, because they're a team that is just not getting the best players. You have to go out and get the best talent when you are so close to a World Series. When you are a contender and you need something to push you over the edge and put you in that we are a dominant club, you need big-time players. And you can't do it on the cheap. The Cubs, you're right, have done it on the cheap. And the Orioles are trying to do it on the cheap as well. They signed Tomoyuki Sugano, Japanese pitcher, 1 year, $13 million. He's 35. He's one of Japan's most accomplished pitchers, 6'1" right-hander, 12 great years with the Yomiuri Giants, the Yankees of Japan, 2.43 ERA in his career. He's coming off a fantastic season, 24 starts, 1.67 ERA, and 156 and 2/3 innings pitched. Nearly came to MLB in 2021. Instead, re-signed with the Giants, 4 years, $40 million. He's a legit talent. He is a little bit older. He doesn't have the same swing and miss as he did when he was a younger man. It's a good move for the Orioles, but they simply aren't getting those top players that they need to make a difference. Right now is their window of contention. And yes, they've gone to the postseason in 23 and 24, but they've still yet to win a game in the postseason. That's a fact. That's a troubling fact if you're an Orioles fan. In this offseason, when they have 2 of their best players, Corbin Burnes and Anthony Santander, more likely than not returning, or more likely than not returning. Yeah, they're going to get 2 more draft picks, 2 more compensation picks, but how much are those picks actually going to help your big league roster? You got Trevor Rogers last year, and you think you can turn it around for him? Scooped him up for the Marlins, gave up some of that prospect capital. You need an ace. You need some superstars. You acquired Tyler O'Neill. Maybe he can continue to make that next step if he can stay healthy. But okay, O'Neill is a cheaper replacement for Santander. Sugano, is he really a cheaper replacement for Corbin Burnes? And what are you going to do beyond that? Because the Orioles have ruled out, I said it earlier in the offseason, that you don't want to go out and acquire and sign one of these players who rejected a qualifying offer because it's going to cost you a draft pick. The Yankees are fine doing something like that because they are able to draft and develop and to acquire players and to take advantage of trades. They gave up virtually nothing for Cody Bellinger. Cody Poteet, nice arm. They picked him up off of waivers in January of this year. So a guy that was a cast-off, they ended up getting an MVP, a former MVP who's still just 29 years old. They got him for nothing. Now they've got that luxury. But if you're the Orioles, you have to hit on some of these big name guys. You've got to go out and try to make a trade. Jesus Luzardo would be nice. But is that a real needle mover? I don't think it is. Good point in the chat. That wall coming in on left field, it did help their pitchers the last few seasons, hurt their hitters. So now guys like Tyler O'Neill, Gary Sanchez, they're going to benefit. The pitchers are not. This is the Orioles starting rotation. You tell me if this sounds like a club that's going to go out and win the AL East. Zach Eflin, Grayson Rodriguez, Tomoyuki Shigano, Dean Kramer, Trevor Rogers, and then for depth, Albert Suarez and prospects Cade Povich and Chase McDermott. That's who the Baltimore Orioles are going to go into their 2025 season with. A club that has gone to the postseason 2 consecutive years and has Adley Rutschman and has Gunnar Henderson. A lot of other really talented young players. Colton Cowser, Heston Kjerstad. You've got to make bigger and better moves than this, especially when these young guys are making the league minimum right now. They're pre-arbitration. Once they start going to arbitration in year 1, year 2, year 3, they're going to be very expensive. Juan Soto, before he even reached free agency this year, he made $30 million in arbitration. $30 million before he was even a free agent. He's certainly an outlier, but just because he was never a free agent doesn't mean he's going to be cheap forever. You get these guys for 3 years before they start making a little bit of money. Then it incrementally goes up and up and up. So you only have a short window where you can say, man, we've got these young players that aren't getting paid a ton, and then we could bring in some other guys. That opportunity is virtually over for the Orioles. They've got to have a much better offseason right now. They're failing in a major way. Good signing, but they're failing right now. On the flip side, guys going over to Asia, Logan Allen. Do you remember him? I think he's Logan S. Allen. There's a Logan Allen with the Guardians right now. But he played with the Isotopes in 22 and 2023, went to spring training with the Rockies in 2023. He's going to play in Korea with the NC Dinos on a 1-year, $700,000 guaranteed contract. Could earn $300,000 in bonuses. Why would you do that? Because $700,000 is guaranteed. It's less than the league minimum. It is. It is less than the league minimum in the majors. But in order to make the league minimum, you actually have to make the big league roster. If you're in AAA, you're going to make a couple $1,000s, a couple $100,000 at best. And if you make the big league roster, then you'll make $760,000. But that's not guaranteed. Logan Allen is not getting those opportunities right now, so he can go over, maybe win a championship. That's always good no matter where you're at. But they can go ahead and do that, win some money. Get some bonus money for winning a championship. Be a little more appreciated and get some guaranteed cash for his family. Other old friends, Brian Serven, he signs a deal with Detroit on a minor league contract. He spent the majority of last season on the Toronto's 40-man, only made 28 big league appearances across 71 trips to the plate. Tigers only have 2 guys on their 40-man roster right now, so I wouldn't be surprised to see him in the majors again this season. Drew Pomeranz signs with the Mariners, another minor league deal. One of those key pieces, if you recall, in that Ubaldo Jimenez trade from way back in 2011. Hasn't been in the majors since 2021. Still only 36, which is virtually young for a lefty reliever. 19 1/3 innings pitched in the minors over the last 3 years, mostly because of shoulder, forearm, and elbow injuries. Was actually on the Giants active roster last May briefly before being released. And I'll end on this. A's and Rays, 2 teams talking about analytics, helping out. A's continue to be aggressive. They acquired Jeffrey Springs and Jacob Lopez, 1 starter, 1 reliever, both lefties from Tampa Bay. Rays get righty Joe Boyle, 2 prospects, and a competitive balance round A pick. Nice deal for Tampa Bay, especially because Springs is going to start to make some money on the extension that he signed. after the 2022 season. He's been hurt the last 2 years, but he's going to make $10.5 million over the next 2 years. There's an option for a third, so maybe he'll be there in Las Vegas for the A's. But Boyle was a fifth-round pick in 2020 out of Notre Dame. He came to Oakland in a trade deadline deal for a lefty reliever they picked up off the scrap heap, former Rocky prospect Sam Moll. Traded Moll to the Reds at the 2023 deadline, and now here's Boyle being included in a deal that brings over some big league talent, prospect, and asset management. As I said, Springs is going to get $21 million over the next 2 years with that option for 2027. Broke out in a big way in 2022, but he's been banged up the last 2 years. He did return at the end of last season, looked pretty good. I did actually write about this, I think in that 2021-22 offseason, that it was just before Springs' breakout. I'd seen some good signs, crafted a deal for the Rockies where they would have gotten this guy just before his breakout, and they would have given up one of their prospects before he crashed out. Springs for Colton Welker, some other pieces included in that deal, certainly would have benefited the Rockies had they made that trade. But Tampa now, with this competitive balance round A pick, they now have 4 of the top 51 picks in next year's 2025 MLB draft. Look out for them as they continue to churn talent. Guys, once they start getting paid money, we'll send you off and we'll bring in somebody younger, somebody cheaper that we can work with. So is Joe Boyle going to be one of those next new players for the Rays you need to get to know? More likely than not, that does happen. And finally, on Tuesday evening, you may have seen, maybe not, the Rays Stadium situation took another turn, this time for the better. Still a lot needs to be worked out, but the Pinellas County Commission did vote 5-2 to approve roughly $312.5 million in public funding for the proposed project to construct a long-term stadium for the Rays. Big problem by approving this $1.3 billion for the Rays is that now, because they missed a deadline, they kept pushing it back because they weren't happy with the Rays going and playing in a different county, in Hillsborough County, where George M. Steinbrenner Stadium is going to be the home of the Rays rather than the one in Clearwater, which is still in Pinellas County. But because they continue to push this vote back, now it seems like the Rays Stadium might not be ready until 2029, which means the costs will increase. And the Rays said, hey, we can't pay the difference in this increase. So now they need to resolve that. And you say, well, why can't they just repair Tropicana Field and then use that facility for something else once the new ballpark is made? I mean, maybe. I don't know what you're going to use this facility for. But the Rays still have some issues. Now, might not be ready until 2029. So that is now 4 seasons that they may be stuck at George M. Steinbrenner Field. MLB has got a problem here in Tampa. And until they sort that out, and until the A's are nestled comfortably in Las Vegas, we're not going to get expansion. Nashville's not going to have a team. Portland, Vancouver, Memphis, Montreal, Charlotte, none of those places are going to have a team until Tampa gets sorted and Vegas becomes finalized. At Patrick D. Lyons, at Patrick D. Lyons, MLB on all social media platforms. What's this comment here? O's are probably going to sign Cal. Who's Cal? Ripken? Is Cal Ripken coming back? I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something. Appreciate everybody in the chat for joining in. You can watch, you can subscribe, you can go ahead and jump into the chat, even post-show over on YouTube, The Rockies Insider. I'm on Blue Sky, at Patrick D. Lyons, MLB. Same thing with Rockies Insider. Appreciate you coming by. Make sure you get signed up for the Rockies Insider newsletter. Just dropped a new one on Tuesday. Baseball card, a Rockies baseball card for Vinny Castilla that stars Deion Sanders, who stole third base on Vinny and his teammates. That was a baseball card. Check it out. I do a dive into that, some transactions. How did Moneyball get started? How did the Rockies impact Moneyball? They did. I wrote about that in the Rockies newsletter. Sign up. It's free. It's fun. You're going to love it. Appreciate the momentum. Appreciate you joining me. But as I like to say, momentum can only be as good as my next show. So I'll talk to you then.